Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, A Hero's Responsibility, written by Kyodon. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin. It was the end of the school day at Aldria Middle School, and the students were happy for their upcoming release. No one is more so happy about this than Izuku Midoriya. Alright, kids, remember that tomorrow is our field trip to Jaku Hospital. The teacher told them as the students packed up and started to leave. By the time the teacher had finished talking, Izuku was already out the door. Being the first one to leave, as usual. After all, no one else packed their things like their life depended on it. Of course, that would only buy him so much time. Bakugo would catch up to him if that was all there was to his leaving school routine. Izuku made a hard left, away from the exit, and down the opposite hallway, where he found his usual hiding spot. The janitor's closet. He swiftly, yet quietly, opened the door, and entered the small, dark closet, taking his favorite spot right next to the mop. Alright, now I just have to wait 10 minutes and everyone should be gone. Izuku thought. Thankfully he didn't have to stay here for as long as he used to. Most of the people that antagonized him, didn't think he was worth the trouble to go look for him in order to torment him. And the ones that did go out of their way, gave up not too long after he started hiding. Even Bakugo didn't hate him enough to spend more than 10 minutes searching the school just to be mean to him. In the meantime, Izuku took out his notebook, a pencil, and a dim light. Bright enough that he would be able to see and write stuff down in his notebook, but not bright enough to give his hiding spot away. On the news yesterday I saw Hawk stop a villain that was completely in his blind side. Izuku thought as he rapidly wrote down his thoughts. Can Hawks tell the positions on things or people with his feathers? Actually, Hawks goes on a lot of covert and undercover missions, maybe that's why. Can he hear things through them like ears, or are they more like echolocation? Ah yes, Izuku's favorite activity. Quirk speculation and analysis. They were pretty in-depth and time-consuming things to be into, but it helped Izuku pass time, and helped keep his mind off the fact that he had no friends. The time flew by, and before Izuku knew it, 10 minutes had passed. Izuku peeked his head out of the closet, cautiously looking around before taking his leave. And as usual, he ran home as fast as his legs could carry him. After all, if he slowed down, who knew what might catch up to him? A few minutes later, back home. Izuku entered into his apartment, and as he closed the door behind him he finally took a sigh of relief. Finally. Safe. Inko wasn't home, of course. She was typically still working at the hospital by this time, but she would be back in a couple of hours. Thankfully I don't have any more injuries for her to patch up. Izuku thought as he walked to his room. Back when Izuku was younger, or heck just a year ago, Izuku getting injured was the equivalent of the sky being blue. It was just kind of the status quo after he was deemed quirkless, and as the years went by, his accidents got worse and worse, to the point where his mother had to start having medical supplies in their house. Fortunately, Izuku had learned to be more careful, and these accidents became far more sparse. He entered his All Might covered room, throwing his All Might themed backpack onto his All Might themed computer chair, took off his red, surprisingly not All Might themed sneakers, and collapsed onto his All Might themed covers, on his All Might themed bed. He did it. He did it perfectly. He pulled off his routine without a hitch. He ran and hid like a coward. Izuku sighed, as he looked up at his hero posters. You don't see heroes running and hiding. They stand up to wrongdoing, and here I am. Glad that I was able to hide in a closet, right? He would cry at the realization of how pathetic he's become. But he'd had the realization and cried those tears far too many times already. This was a routine, all right. And therefore, it happened regularly. This was just his life now. And he absolutely hated it. I just wish I could be someone like you, Izuku said, looking up at his All Might poster. Meanwhile, elsewhere. Fuku Hospital was to most people a good place. A place that helped thousands of people get treated for injuries, diseases, and other terrible things. And to most people, Kyodai Garaki was a good man. One of the few examples of a notable quirkless person in a quirk-obsessed society. A man who would help people, in spite of his condition. But the hospital, and its owner, held a dark secret. Because hidden below it, was an evil lab no really. And Dr. Garaki, was secretly an associate of the most powerful villain in history, all for one. Whom he was currently in a call with right now. "Escaped," said the supervillain through the computer monitor, its light illuminating the dim room. "Yes, it appears I underestimated its intelligence, and after the latest round of experimentation, it escaped," Garaki reported, petting his favorite Nomu as it rested on his lap. "It's quite smart for a spider, isn't it? This is unfortunate news. I had a great interest in that particular Nomu." All for one lamented. "Ah yes, the quirk to pass on one's abilities by injecting its venom into a person, could be quite the valuable asset if I could learn how to replicate its quirk," Dr. Garaki said. "But do not fear, I doubt it has left the hospital. Hopefully, we'll find it soon." "I sincerely hope so, Doctor." All for one told him. It would be quite troublesome if that spider were to bite a hero. Imagine, a hero with the abilities of an augmented spider. A hero like that would be quite troublesome. The next day. "And this is the morgue. This is where we store the dead bodies until the families come to claim them," said a very broad doctor to a very broad class. The class trip had gone, as expected. With no showing any interest, including their guide and teachers. Izuku was probably the only one actually paying attention, if only because he wanted to see if he could learn how to patch himself up so his mother didn't have to. However, even Izuku's attention started to waver, as the person speaking clearly didn't care. "I wonder how many heroes have been in this hospital. I don't hear about a lot of heroes coming here. It's kind of weird considering how famous this place is. Maybe this place is ill-equipped to heal people with more powerful quirks. No, that can't be it. There are plenty of people with powerful quirks that aren't heroes, so this hospital would have to heal them, and there are quite a few heroes with less than powerful quirks, although I guess my knowledge about those heroes is lacking." Izuku thought, although little did he know, his thoughts were leaking out in the form of muttering. "Shut the hell up, Deku!" Bakugo shouted at his most hated classmate, igniting his palms for intimidation. "Ah. Sorry, I didn't mean to mutter." Izuku put his hands in front of his face in defense. "Please, no quirks in the hospital, please." The doctor scolded Bakugo, still not caring. Bakugo glared at Izuku for a few moments, before turning towards the rest of the group. After a few moments, Izuku gave a sigh of relief and followed the group as they moved on through the hospital's halls. But, little did anyone know that while Izuku was distracted with this little altercation, a spider, no bigger than a grape, crawled onto him, and up his brief leg. As Izuku moved with his class, the spider climbed higher and higher up Izuku's body. "I wonder if All Might has ever had to go to the hospital," Izuku wondered. The spider reached his torso. "Maybe a few times, I doubt it's more than a handful. After all, what could get through his near-impervious skin?" Izuku asked himself. The spider crawled through Izuku's sleeve. "I wonder if his quirk also boosts his immune system," Izuku pondered. If that's the case, he may never had to go to the hospital since he was 5. The spider crawled onto the back of Izuku's hand, and that's when it bit him. Izuku shouted, as suddenly it felt like his hand was on fire. He looked down at his hand and wondered what could be causing this pain, and saw the little spider pumping its venom into him. Midoriya. His teacher called to him and the entire class looked at him with varying expressions, but Izuku had other things to focus on. Ack. Midoriya hit the back of his hand against the wall, squashing the spider and killing it instantly, reducing it to paste. But that didn't make the pain any better. Izuku felt the burning sensation not only get worse but spread, from his hand to his arm and soon to the rest of his body. Ah. Ack. What the F are doing, Deku? Bakugo barked at Izuku. I spider bit me poison. Izuku's legs suddenly went numb, and he fell back onto the floor. Poison? Asked one of the students looking concerned. PSH. He's just being a crybaby. Laughed another student. I don't know, look at him, he looks like he's dying. Said another student. Deku. Bakugo's aggression faded, as Izuku laid on the floor, his eyes closing. Deku. Ikaken. The last thing Izuku heard before passing out was the doctor calling for help. Sometime later. Oh. What happened? Izuku opened his eyes, and after taking a few seconds for his eyes to get adjusted to the light, he was met with the sight of pure white walls and a pure white ceiling. I'm in a hospital room. Izuku looked around and confirmed his statement. He had an IV drip in his arm, and he was dressed in a hospital gown. Why am I right the poison? Izuku cringed as he remembered the burning pain that went through his body. It's like that spider had set his BLD on fire. Shaking his head to rid himself of those thoughts, he then looked down at his arms. It seems like whatever happened is over. I guess the poison worked its way out of my system. Izuku thought. But something just wasn't right. His body felt strange. Not bad, just strange. Izuku didn't have time to think about that, as the door suddenly opened, and himself walked in. Oh good, you're awake, said as he walked up to the young boy. Dr. Garaki. What happened to me? Izuku asked the doctor. Well, you were poisoned by a spider. What kind of poison and what kind of spider is unknown, unfortunately, but fortunately it wasn't lethal. It did however cause you to go into a coma for a week, the doctor revealed. A week? Izuku shouted in surprise. I'm asleep for a week. Oh God, Mom must have been so worried. Ah yes, your mother visited quite a few times, and we'd had to mop the floors from the trails of tears she left each time. Dr. Garaki explained. I suppose, you, her, and the janitorial staff will be happy to hear that you have a clean bill of health, and you'll be released later today. What really? Izuku was shocked, he didn't think one could recover from being in a coma so quickly. Yes, it was quite surprising. Told him. You recovered very quickly, but either way, we'll give you one last checkup, and then you can be on your way. Oh okay. Thank you, sir. Izuku gave the doctor a polite bow. The doctor smiled. There was no issue. After all, you were quite an interesting patient. Later that night, Izuku and Inko were happy to be home. Inko had to spend 10 minutes outside the hospital, hugging Izuku and crying onto his shirt, just so that way she could focus on driving them home. After the two of them entered their house, Izuku immediately noticed a lovely aroma in the air. Is that Katsudon? A rare, genuine smile broke its way onto Izuku's face, as he ran into the kitchen to see his favorite meal ready and on the table. It wasn't until this moment that Izuku realized he was absolutely starving. Inko walked in and saw the joy on her son's face, and smiled. I thought you might be hungry so I made your favorite. We should eat now before it gets cold. Izuku did not need to be told twice. The two sat down and started eating, but Izuku was absolutely destroying his katsudon. Eating it way faster than normal, and that was saying something. Izuku calmed down. You're going to choke. Inko warned him. But by the time Inko told him this, Izuku had already finished his bowl. Ah, sorry. Izuku apologized, as he moved on to his second bowl. For some reason I'm just really hungry. After a week in a coma I suppose that's to be expected. Inko told her son. After finishing his second bowl, Izuku looked up and noticed something. The trash was overflowing. Not only that, but there were 4 trash bags lying next to it. Mom, why is there so much trash? Izuku asked his mother, looking at her with concern. Were you not taking care of yourself? Were you stress eating again? Mom, you know that's not healthy. Inko blushed with shame. I know Booty was so worried about you. No one knew what kind of poison you were injected with, or what it was doing to you. They kept saying you were okay but you weren't waking up. No more than 5 seconds into her explanation, Inko had started crying. It was a wonder how she had any tears left after crying so much, but it was the Midoriya family's hidden quirk. Unlimited tears. Izuku quickly made his way to his mother, hugging her and comforting her some more. After a few minutes Izuku helped his mother up. Maybe you should go to bed. Yes, that sounds like a good idea. I'm very tired but first I should take out the trash. Inko said, looking at the buildup of trash. I'll do that, don't worry about it Mom. Izuku reassured her. But you just woke up from a coma. Inko objected. I can't let you do that. No Mom, it's fine. Izuku quickly moved over to the trash, and picked it all up. It's really light. The trash bags felt like they had practically nothing in it. But Izuku knew they were full, and from the look of it, had some stuff that should have made them decently heavy. And it's not like Izuku worked out so it should have been a struggle just to carry 2 of them with both hands, but it felt like he could carry all 4 of them with one hand with no issue. That's weird. Izuku didn't have a lot of medical knowledge, but he was pretty sure getting stronger after being in a coma, was the opposite of what was supposed to happen. Izuku shook his head to clear his thoughts. I can worry about that later. He looked at his mother who was also confused by Izuku's sudden strength, but way more worried about it than he was. Izuku, are you okay? Yeah, I feel pretty good. Izuku still didn't know what was happening to his body. He'd felt weird ever since he woke up, and while the feeling, he decided, was a good one, it was still one he was unsure to and unsure why it was present. But the last thing he wanted to do was worry his mother about this. I'll take out the trash, you just go to bed. Izuku told her. Inko was about to say something but whoosh. Suddenly at speeds Inko couldn't even comprehend, Izuku was out the door. After a few moments of shock, Inko had one question in his mind. Does Izuku have a quirk? Back with Izuku. Izuku was at the dumpster. The dumpster that was located all the way at the bottom of the stairs to his apartment, which was about a 2-minute long walk, a minute long run on average. But Izuku had just been in his house, a second ago. What? How? That it was all just, Izuku struggled to think straight after that experience, brief it may have been. It was all a blur to him, he just ran like he normally did, but everything went by so much faster, before he realized it he was already at his destination. It was like he had super speed. What is going on? Izuku was now 100% sure that something was wrong. Something about him was wrong. Or maybe not wrong, but different. I lifted heavy trash bags and they felt like nothing. I moved from my house to the dumpster in a second. Izuku looked down, and realized that in his surprise, he let go of the trash bags. Or at least, he stopped grabbing them, but the trash bags were still stuck to his palms. Izuku moved his hands around him, testing to see if the bags would fall, but they didn't. And it's not as if the trash bags were sticky. He could feel if they were sticky, and they definitely weren't sticky. And now my hands are sticky. Why are they sticky? They weren't sticky before. Is it because I wanted to grab something? How do I unstick? Izuku thought. Unstick. Come off. Release. Nothing happened. Izuku shook his hands around trying to get the garbage bag off his hand. He tried to pull the garbage bag off his hand with his other hand, and after a bit of effort it worked. But then it got stuck to that hand. Oh. Calm down Izuku. Izuku told himself, taking deep breaths as he tried to compose himself. Izuku released the tension in his hand and then the garbage bags fell out of it. What happened? Was it because I relaxed my hand? Izuku asked himself, as he looked at his now empty palm. Izuku thought about this for a moment, before looking up at the nearby wall, and then back at his hand. He slowly approached the wall, and then put his hand on it. His hand tensed, and when he tried to pull away, crack. He took some of the wall with him. Izuku would have freaked out about that, if he didn't come to the realization of something that would change his life forever. I have a quirk. It took a few moments for Izuku's mind to process that statement, getting past the sheer disbelief and denial echoing in his head. But when it did, tears tread familiar trails down his cheeks, but this time, for the first time in years. They were happy tears. A goofy grin covered his face, as an overwhelming joy filled his heart. I have a quirk. Izuku jumped into the air in celebration, but his jump ended up being way higher than he thought. In that he jumped halfway up the very tall building. And then, he started to fall. Woa! Izuku shouted as he fell. And then suddenly he felt a strange buzzing in his head. Ground incoming. I know. Izuku shouted at whatever was alerting him of the fact that the ground was getting closer and closer. Thinking quickly, Izuku put his hand on the wall, stopping his fall as his hand stuck to the building. Phew! Izuku took a sigh of relief, as he hung off the side of the building. Och no, what do I do? He was stuck. If he let go, then he would fall. Which might not kill him, but he didn't know that for sure. Och, maybe I can crawl to the ground. Izuku asked himself. After pulling up his courage, Izuku stuck his other hand onto the wall, sticking it just like the first hand. And then he tried to stick his feet to the wall, and that's where he had a problem. His shoes. Try as he might, Izuku could not get his feet to stick on the wall, and he quickly realized the problem was with his shoes. Okay, so my skin has to make direct contact with a surface to stick to it. That makes sense. Izuku analyzed. He started trying to kick his shoes off his feet, and after a few seconds he managed to do it, causing his shoes to fall to the ground. After peeling his socks off his feet using his toes, his feet were finally exposed. In the moment of truth, Izuku brought his feet to the wall. And they stuck. Seconds later Izuku started crawling around on the walls, tensing and relaxing his hands very slowly and carefully, as to make sure he didn't make a mistake and fall. The overjoyed smile returned to his face, as Izuku neared the ground. This is so cool. After a bit more wall crawling, Izuku made it to the ground and got back up. I can crawl on walls. Izuku exclaimed excitedly, this time being careful not to celebrate it too hard. I wonder how that works. Izuku started touching his hand, feeling around for anything different. Maybe it's -twhip. When Izuku pressed down the bottom of his palm, and from his wrist shot out a web, that latched onto the wall. Izuku froze, for a moment, before looking up at where the web had stuck to the wall, and then looking down the web that connected all the way to his wrist. There was now a hole in his wrist, where the web was coming out of. He stopped pressing down on his palm with his finger, and the hole closed, cutting off the web. I can shoot webs. Izuku with a mixture of excitement and confusion. It took a few moments, but as Izuku reflected on his abilities, he realized something, and slowly started to piece things together. I can climb up walls, shoot webs, I have super strength and super speed. I have all the abilities of a spider. I got these powers after I got bit by a strange spider that filled me with an unknown venom. Did that spider give me a quirk? Izuku realized. Can that happen? I know animals can have quirks, but could there really be a quirk like that? But that's the only thing I can think of. How else could I get a quirk? Maybe the reason I was in a coma was because my body was adjusting to this new mutation. After a bit more thinking, Izuku put those thoughts aside, and the smile returned to his face. That doesn't matter right now. I have a quirk. Wanting to test out his new abilities immediately, Izuku looked up at the floor where his apartment was located. About 30 feet up. He raised his hand up, and started aiming. Thwip. Izuku pressed down on his palm using his middle and ring fingers, and a web shot out of his wrist, and flew up into the air, landing on the floor Izuku was aiming at. The green-haired boy's smile grew even wider, as he jumped up, pulling on the web so it would bring him exactly where he wanted to go. Once he got close, he grabbed the handrail and flipped over it, before landing on his feet. Whoa! It wasn't a perfect landing and it took Izuku a second to gain his balance, but it was a far better acrobatic feat than anything Izuku had done before. Do I have super reflexes too? This is amazing. I need to tell Mom about this. He turned around and opened the door, however in his excitement he used too much force, and pulled the door off its hinges. Oh. Izuku thought of a way to fix this before his mom saw it. Wait. Izuku walked in, put the door back in place, and then started webbing it up, until the door was stuck in place. Zero might have some problems getting out, but at least no one can break in. Izuku thought aloud. Izuku, is that you? Inko ran in, having heard the sound of her door being broken. She stopped and looked on in confusion, at her webbed-up door. What yap? Mom. That spider gave me a quirk. Izuku ran up to his mother and grabbed her so fast she didn't even see him move. Also, we need a new door. Inko was frozen for a few moments, before fainting of shock in her son's arms. Mom. After eventually waking Inko up, the two got on the couch and moved to talking about this new predicament. And then Inko came to a shocking conclusion. You can't use it, Inko told him firmly. What? Izuku almost jumped off the couch in shock. What do you mean I can't use it? Why not? Mom, do you know what this means for me? People will stop bullying me. Kaken might actually like me again. I'll finally be able to become a hero. But what if it's temporary? Inko asked him, giving him a sad and concerned look. Immediately, Izuku deflated, and his pupils shrunk in despair as he realized what his mother was talking about. This was not, technically speaking, his quirk. It was an effect of the spider's quirk. Or at least that's what they assumed. And quirk effects were not always permanent. Most of the time they weren't. So that meant that his newfound power might be short-lived. All the excitement drained from Izuku, and Inko's heart broke as she saw her son's face fall. But she knew that it was better to bring this to his attention now. Because if she let him freely use his quirk, and train with it, only to lose it in a week or two, then he would be crushed. Let's just wait a month, Inko told him, trying to put some hope back into him. If it is temporary then it would have worn off by then. If you still have it, then it's probably permanent. And you'll be free to use it however you'd like. Izuku clenched his fist tightly as if trying to physically hold on to the hope that this would last. That it wouldn't just be a cruel joke. To understand. Also, I know you'd want to go out of your way to help people with your quirk. But remember that you don't know how to use it yet. Inko warned him. With that much power, you could end up hurting someone very badly if you're not careful. If you see someone in danger, just let the heroes handle it, sweetie. Again, another good point, that Izuku didn't like at all. Yes, Mom. And one last thing, dear. Inko hated that she had to say all this, but she knew she needed to. Don't tell anyone at school about your quirk. We both know what they'll do if you show it off, and then lose it later. Oh God, he could only imagine. The only reason the discrimination and bullying was bearable right now is because it stopped being the most amusing thing in the world to them. If he lost his quirk after showing it off, then it would renew interest in him, and give them all something new to throw in his face. Once again another good point that he didn't want to hear. At this point, Izuku was just standing there with his head held low. Looking more defeated than he had in a while. Inko stood up and grabbed Izuku's shoulders. Izuku, look at me. Izuku slowly lifted his gaze up to meet Inko's and saw her smiling lovingly at him. We don't know if they're temporary. They might be permanent. Inko told him. And if they're not? It's not the end of the world. You could still be a doctor. They save people. It wasn't the same. It would never be the same. Not that Izuku didn't respect doctors, he absolutely did, his mother was one after all. But Izuku had always dreamed of being a hero. Ever since he knew what a hero was. It wasn't easy to just give up on your dreams. But he couldn't explain that to her. He had failed at that too many times. Alright, Mom. Izuku sighed. In the end, he couldn't refuse her authority nor refute her points. So he just had to go along with it. He'd already put up with all the bullying and powerlessness all his life anyway, what was another month? How bad could it be? The next day. Take a swan dive off the roof and hope you're born with a quirk in your next life. Bakugo told him mockingly. Very bad. Turns out the answer was very bad. Let's go back a bit. You see, the teacher had talked to all of them about thinking seriously about their future for about 2 seconds before just saying, who cares, you all want to be heroes. And then he pointed out that both he and Bakugo applied for you, which brought life back to the dead horse that was making fun of Izuku. Naturally, everyone laughed at him. But Bakugo had a different reaction. Suddenly, while Izuku was sitting in his seat wishing he could just disappear, he felt something, that strange buzzing in his head again. Incoming. Left. He barely turned his head in time to see Bakugo coming at him with his palm raised and a look that would make a grown man shrivel up in fear. It seemed like time had slowed, and Izuku guessed that was a result of his new spider speed, and so whereas he actually had about a second to react, it felt like he had 10. So he leaned back, so when Bakugo slammed his palm against his desk and blew it up, the explosion just missed him. Bakugo was shouting at him, but Izuku wasn't listening. His brain was too busy thinking about what just happened. That buzzing. The same thing happened last night. Some kind of warning system. Like a spider sense. Izuku thought. Do spiders normally have that? What else can it do? Does it just tell me if I'm in danger, or does it tell me if other people are in danger too? What about danger that isn't physical? Will it tell me if I'm about to say something wrong? Then suddenly, Izuku felt Bakugo grab his shirt. Hey! Pay attention to me, Deku. Huh? Why didn't it go off? Izuku wondered. Kaken went to grab me, so why, unless it only alerts me if I'm actually being attacked? Kaken just went to grab me and didn't attack me yet. So since he didn't go to attack me, it didn't go off. DKU. Bakugo could see that Izuku still was not paying him full attention, and so he raised his palm, ready to attack him. And the spider sense still didn't go off. Bakugo was about to attack, but suddenly he was stopped. Bakugo, if you are going to assault Midoriya, then please wait till after my class. His teacher warned him half-heartedly. The explosive blonde paused, and eventually backed off, letting Izuku go, glaring at the boy all the while he returned to his seat. Kaken definitely went to hit me there. Why didn't it go off? Unless that was a bluff. Izuku theorized. No. That's not like Kaken at all. If he wanted to attack me, he definitely would. The only thing I can think of is that it didn't warn me because Kaken didn't end up actually attacking me, but how would the spider sense know that unless it's a precognition ability? And Midoriya. Please stop with the creepy muttering. His teacher scolded him, with a far harsher tone than he had with Bakugo. Yes, sir. Sorry. Izuku apologized. Later Izuku did what he normally did and packed up as quickly as he could, or rather, he would have done that if that wouldn't have given away the fact that he now had super speed. Since Izuku hadn't really gotten used to his new powers, he knew that if he attempted to go as fast as he normally did, he would mess up and move way faster than a normal person should. So he restrained his movements and went slowly and carefully. And this had the expected result. Bakugo came in, told him not to apply to you, threatened him, destroyed his notebook. Typical stuff, and as the blonde and his minions were leaving, Izuku thought he might actually get a break, and that would be all Bakugo did to him today. Until he said this. Take a swan dive off the roof, and hope you're born with a quirk in your next life. Izuku's eyes bulged and he paused for a second, trying to figure out if what he heard was really what he said. When he eventually realized that yes, Bakugo really said that, his blood boiled. He looked at Bakugo with a look of pure anger, and Bakugo met his gaze with confidence, holding up his palm to remind him of his power. Izuku's fist clenched. Never in his life had he wanted to punch Bakugo so much. And maybe it's because now he could. With his new power, he now actually stood a chance in a fight with him. But, he held back. His fist unclenched, and he turned away from Bakugo. Heh. Bakugo chuckled. Weakling. The bully and his entourage left, leaving Izuku alone in the classroom. He sighed and looked out the window where Bakugo had thrown his notebook. Izuku did a scan of the classroom and then looked around the area down below the window. No one was there. No one was watching. He knew he shouldn't do this. He really shouldn't. But no one was looking, so it wouldn't hurt to use his quirk just a little bit. And so he jumped out the window, from the 4th floor. After about a second of freefall, Izuku landed safely on the ground, without a scratch. Izuku smiled to himself for a second. It was just a reminder that this was real and that at least for now he had a quirk. He prayed it would last. Moving on, he walked towards the pool of water that his notebook was now floating in, and much to his dismay the fish in the pond were nibbling at it. Izuku sighed, and quickly picked the soaking wet notebook. My dreams aren't fish food. Now with the rush of using his powers for a second had worn off, he was back to thinking about what Bakugo had said. I can't believe he said something so stupid. Izuku shouted as he walked out the school gates. What if I really did kill myself? He'd have committed a murder basically. He wasn't actually gonna do it. He'd never even thought of doing it. And he was sure that Bakugo didn't actually mean it. But the fact that he actually said that showed that his former friend was really far gone. And it hurt to see. What happened to us Kaken? Izuku asked aloud, as he walked underneath a bridge on his way home. Did quirks really change you so much? He still remembered, very clearly, the time when they were friends. Although it was now far in the past, and a very short part of his life, it was some of the best memories he had, so he held on to them tightly. How did it go from that to this? Behind you. His spider sense went off, and the buzzing was much stronger than it had ever been before. To the point where it hurt a bit. He quickly looked behind him and saw a giant hand made of sludge was coming at him. Oh God! Izuku jumped back a good 10 feet, safely dodging the sludge. A villain. Izuku's eyes widened in fear and shock as he watched the villain come closer to him. A medium-sized disguise. Perfect. The villain was literally a mass of sludge, with its only 2 human-like characteristics, being 2 eyes and a mouth. Hey, kid. Let me borrow your body. And with that the villain lunged at him, extending his sludge tentacle to try and snatch up Izuku. The spider-powered teen dodged to the side, before moving to the other side to get away from another tentacle. I have to get out of sight. Izuku thought. He looked around, and saw the buildings around him, before getting an idea. Kicking himself off the ground with a mighty jump, he launched himself a good 20 feet. Then while in mid-air, he quickly kicked off his shoes and socks, before turning to a nearby building and shooting out a web line. The line hit the building, and Izuku pulled himself towards it. Izuku hit the building and latched onto it with his hands and feet. Sticking to it with his quirk. Hey! Get back here! The villain shouted as it shouted out another sludge tendril at the teen. Izuku quickly crawled up the building, the tendril barely missing him and smashing into the building, breaking apart the concrete it smashed into. He made it to the roof and looked down at the sludge villain. Hey! Come back down! The villain cried. Seems like his range extends up here. Izuku thought, breathing a sigh of relief. He was safe. He could easily take off and run to find a hero. Pa. Fine. I'll just find another disguise. The villain shouted. Izuku's eyes widened. His pupils dilating, as he realized that now with him out of reach, the sludge villain would go attack someone else. Someone who was much less equipped to escape from this horrifying monster of a villain. In that instant, he knew what he had to do. As the villain started running away in the other direction, Izuku jumped off the roof and started shooting webbed shots at the villain's back, but they were all absorbed into the monster's liquid body. Doing nothing. The villain turned around and saw Izuku falling back towards the ground. So you came back. Stupid kid. The sludge villain launched out another tendril at Izuku, but the teen shot a web at the ground and tugged, pulling himself towards the ground at great speed, dodging the tendril. He landed on the street so hard, it cracked the ground. And yet he was unaffected. Its body was unaffected by my webs. And I don't think I can punch his liquid body away. Izuku was quickly trying to come up with ideas before the villain could get another chance to attack him. He focused on the villain's eyes and saw them swivel to look at him. And a light bulb illuminated over his head. The villain shot out another tendril at Izuku, and the boy moved a foot to the side to dodge it, before shooting out a web shot at the villain's eyes. Ah! The shot hit, and the villain's eye was covered in a thick, sticky web. Get it off! Get it off! The villain started flailing wildly, its slimy tendrils thrashing everything nearby. Knocking over parking meters, damaging cars, breaking windows, and causing other damage to his surroundings. Seeing how well that worked, Izuku unleashed a barrage of web shots at the villain's eye and mouth, covering them in a sheet of webbing. The villain tried to yell out curses at Izuku, but the webs around its face kept any words from coming out. Time to finish this. Izuku shouted. He shot a web line at the villain's face, which was covered by the web sheet. And then started pulling. The villain shouted out in panic, as he felt his face literally being pulled off his body. He tried to resist, urge his body to keep hold of his eyes and mouth, but Izuku's webbing was too strong, and his strength too much, and after a few moments, eventually, they plopped free. The eyes and mouth plopped onto the floor, and the sludge body fell to the floor. Seemingly motionless. After taking a few moments to take everything, Izuku realized that the fight was over. He won. 2 did it. I won. I beat the villain. Elation filled Izuku's body, as a huge grin broke out on his face. I won. Did you now? Said a gruff voice from behind him. Izuku's pupils shrink in fear. As a hero nerd, he immediately recognized that voice. He turned behind him and saw the hero Death Arms standing there with his arms crossed. Kid, do you know what vigilantism is? Death Arms had been pursuing the sludge villain but had lost track of him when he went into the sewers. Now he finally found the BSTRD only to see that some kid had taken him down. Impressive, and illegal. Why yes, sir. Izuku wilted under the hero's gaze. But I was attacked, could you have run away? Death Arms asked him. What? Izuku realized. Where this was going. Could you have run away? Death Arms repeated sternly. I's. Izuku's head fell and his shoulders slumped. I could have used my quirk to run away. Well, then what the hell did you think you were doing fighting that guy? Death Arms scolded him, yelling so loudly that it would put Present Mike to shame. Unlicensed use of a quirk is illegal. And you can see why. Look at all the property damage you caused. Izuku turned around and cringed when he saw that there was a good deal of damage done to his surroundings. Messed up cars, broken parts of the streets, chunks missing in the walls, etc. If I wanted to, I could arrest you, you know. Death Arms shouted at him. Izuku froze on the spot, as fear filled his body. Oh God. If I get arrested I might never be a hero, quirk or not. Oh God, what did I do? What did hey? Death Arms grabbed Izuku's shoulders and shook him to get his attention back. Listen. I'm gonna let you go for now. Since no one got hurt, and you took him down easy enough it seems. I'd be ashamed to let someone with your potential get blocked from the hero business because of this. A wave of relief washed over Izuku and yet again a smile broke out on his face, this time accompanied by tears of joy. Lots of tears. Literal rivers of tears. Thank you, sir. Thank you. So much. Okay. Okay. Jeez. Death Arms pushed Izuku away, not wanting the literal rivers of tears to soak his costume. Suddenly Death Arms stopped, as he spotted something from behind Izuku. It was the sludge villain. He was escaping down into the sewer. Little did Izuku or Death Arms know. While the sludge villain's face was separated from its body, controlling its body became much harder, but not impossible. It could slowly use its body in any direction, and while Izuku and Death Arms were distracted, he managed to push his body back towards his face, regaining full control, before slithering back into the sewers. DMN it. Death Arms ran past Izuku. Go back, home kid. Let the pros deal with this. And with that, he was gone. Leaving Izuku alone. Honestly, he wasn't sure how to feel. On the one hand, the villain got away. On the other hand, he didn't get arrested for vigilantism. And although Izuku was glad that his chances of being a hero weren't killed at that moment, he was also deeply frustrated that his hard work in taking out the villain was for nothing. He sighed and looked at the destruction the villain had caused and winced once again. Izuku could only imagine the pain it would be to clean all this up. It was far from the worst destruction he'd seen a villain cause while fighting a hero, very far in fact. But it was also very far from the instant victory, no collateral damage All Might fights. I still have a lot to improve if I'm gonna be the #1 hero. Assuming that this quirk lasts. Izuku sighed. He had been able to defeat the villain with his quirk, but his quirk might not be permanent. What would have happened if he didn't have this quirk, he wondered. Well, the answer was obvious. He would have died. Izuku looked at his hand. Clenching and unclenching it. He'd always known he was weak before. But, ironically, it was only now that had power, did he truly know how powerless he was before. Kaboom! Izuku's attention snapped back to reality, as an explosion went off in the distance. That was only a few miles away. Izuku thought, as he quickly realized what happened. That must be the sludge villain. His first reaction was to run towards it, and see what was going on. After all, he loved watching hero fights. But then he stopped when he remembered what Death Arms told him. To go home. He knew he should probably listen. He'd let Izuku off with a warning and he shouldn't take advantage of the man's kindness. After thinking about it for a minute, he decided to go. After all, he was just going to watch. Get some closure. See for himself that the villain was taken care of. He was just going to watch. With that in mind, Izuku started running towards the explosions. A few minutes later. Izuku hoped he wasn't too late. He had to restrain himself again, to keep from moving at super speeds again, so it's not like he got here as fast as he could. However, judging from the continuing explosions, and a group of people gathered near the explosions, and the fact that his spider sense was going off like crazy, he guessed that the fight was still going on. From the distance over the crowd, he could only see bits of green sludge, confirming his suspicions. Get closer. Get closer. Go go go. The buzzing in his head was so powerful, more powerful than it had ever been before. And he knew that whatever was going on in front must have been really bad. But couldn't see much more than that through the crowd. He'd need to get closer. So he gently, and slowly pushed through the crowd, trying to make sure he didn't hurt anyone with his super strength or even reveal he had it. Eventually, He made it to the front and was able to get a full view of the nightmare that was in front of him past the police tape. The entire area was littered with flames, as Backdraft and Kamui Woods worked to both put out the flames and rescue the people still in the area. Destruction was everywhere, with the sludge villain at its center. Several other heroes were present, such as Death Arms, and Empty Lady was also nearby, but it seemed like she couldn't get anywhere close to the villain, because the area was too small for her to fit, and Death Arms was just standing by the crowd, and no hero was attacking the villain directly. But the worst part was that the villain had a hostage. Kaken. Izuku thought as pure horror filled his body and mind, and his face went white with terror. Bakugo was being held by the sludge villain, stuck in its body while the villain tried to suffocate him. The explosive teen was trying his best to escape, using his explosions to try and free himself, but all that did was set the surrounding area on fire. Never in his life had Izuku seen Bakugo, the cool, powerful Bakugo, so helpless, and it absolutely terrified him. The pure fear in his eyes was so odd, so out of place. The vulnerability is so contrasting with his image of his former friend. It was like watching someone light water on fire. It was opposite to what one would expect, that it boggles the mind. Move. Move. Save him. Save him. Izuku, without thinking, moved forward, about to try and save Bakugo himself. However, he only made it past the police tape, before he was stopped by Death Arms, who held Izuku back with his hand. What? You again? Death Arms said when he saw the person he was holding back was Izuku. I thought I told you to go home. Kaken. Izuku shouted out to his captured tormentor, before turning to Death Arms. Please. You have to help him. Why aren't you helping him? Death Arms winced. The desperation in Izuku's tone and the use of what was obviously a nickname implied that the person being held captive was a friend of the boys. Just hang in there, kid. Let the pros handle it. Izuku remembered when Death Arms had said that earlier. And then he remembered his mother's words. With that much power, you could end up hurting someone very badly if you're not careful. If you see someone in danger, just let the heroes handle it, sweetie. Unlicensed use of a quirk is illegal. And you can see why. Look at all the property damage you caused. This was different from last time. Now there were people around. A lot of people. People who could get hurt if he charged in recklessly like he did last time. And the surrounding buildings were already weakened by the fire if the villain did that thrashing about like he did last time when Izuku blinded him. Not to mention, with all these people here, there was no way he'd get away with the same blatant vigilantism. If he moved in, not only could people get hurt, but his dreams of getting into you would end there and then. After all, they didn't allow criminals. Still, the pure look of fear on Bakugo's face made him want to charge in right away. Even now his body was moving forward unconsciously, only held back by Death Arms's arm. After a few moments, he came to a decision. And he stopped. He had always admired heroes as a child. He practically worshipped them. He could trust them to take care of this. Right. And so he waited. And watched. While the heroes did nothing. Move. Move. Save him. He's dying. Save him. His spider sense was going off like crazy. It hurt so much to ignore it. But had to write. He waited, and waited, and waited, for someone to do something. But no one did. Save him. Move. Seconds turned to minutes, as more and more time went on, and no one made a move to stop the villain. No one moved to save Bakugo. Why? Izuku whispered, only being loud enough for Death Arms to hear before he started yelling at the top of his lungs. Why isn't anyone doing anything? We can't. Death Arms yelled at the kid. What do you mean you can't? That made Izuku angry. He just told him to sit there and trust the heroes, and now he's saying they can't do anything. You're heroes. Do something. His body is immune to all-out attacks. Death Arms argued. We're waiting for backup. Attack his face. Izuku screamed at him at the top of his lungs. Death Arms' eyes widened, and he looked back at the sludge villain and realized that while most of its body and arms were made of liquid, its face was not. Never in his life had he felt like such a failure. Moving quickly, Death Arms bent down, and dug his fingers into the road, before using his strength to pull out a huge chunk of the street. Hey ugly. Ha. The villain looked at Death Arms, giving the hero a good look at its face. And so Death Arms threw the chunk of the street at the villain as hard as he could. Ag. The villain's face was thrown off his body, knocked away by the hunk of tar. His body fell to the floor, and Bakugo was free. Although at this point, he had already fallen conscious, so he just laid there, in a puddle of sludge. Kaken. Izuku ran forward, with the villain defeated, he had no reason to stay back, and so he ran to him. Meanwhile, Death Arms quickly went over and picked up the sludge villain's face. Not letting the same thing happen twice. Izuku went over to Bakugo's unconscious body, and much to his relief he was still breathing. They weren't too late. Bakugo was saved. The next day, at Izuku's house. Katsuki's dying, Inko told him tearfully. What? Fortunately, Izuku was already sitting, otherwise, his legs would have crumbled beneath him and made him fall on his butt. The sludge. It was in his mouth too long he got sick. Inko sobbed, trying her best to explain this through the tears. It was in him too long. It was in him. Too long. He could have stopped this. He should have stopped this. Izuku had beaten the sludge villain already. He could have done it again in record time. But he just stood by. He let Kaken die. It had been 2 weeks since Izuku had gotten the news of Katsuki's imminent death. Katsuki only had 3 more weeks left apparently. Bakugo of course hadn't gone to school. Even if he wanted to, his body was too weak. He had been held up in his house. Izuku couldn't imagine how he was taking this. He didn't want to imagine it. Izuku hadn't gone to school either. He didn't have the motivation to leave the house, and his mother didn't have the heart to make him, rather she called the school to say Izuku would be on leave due to family matters. Which wasn't technically wrong. The Greenette had been mostly unresponsive. The first week was spent entirely in shock. He didn't say a word the entire time. Barely moving. Only performing basic human functions like sleeping and eating. The second week was when his emotions began to run rampant. He cried, he screamed, he used his new super strength to smash almost everything in his room. Hundreds of dollars in merchandise was lost, but Izuku couldn't bring himself to care right now. Speaking to those powers, about the only good thing that could be said about these past few weeks is that the powers stayed around. And seemed to be permanent. But even that Izuku couldn't bring himself to be happy about. How could he? His childhood friend was dying. And it was his fault. Izuku didn't know if he should see Bakugo. He didn't know if Bakugo would want to see him. Heck, he didn't know if he deserved to see him. Maybe the last he would see of Katsuki would be from that attack. With his face contorted in terror and begging for help. Help that would only come, too late. Maybe the last he would see of Katsuki would be the image he would forever remember, and be forced to look at every time he closed his eyes. But to his surprise. One day Inko got a call from Mitsuki, saying that Katsuki wanted to see Izuku. And so despite not being sure if he could bear to see his old friend dying because of his actions, he knew he had no right to refuse. So here he was, at the Bakugo household, standing in front of Katsuki's door. He said he wanted to see you alone. Mitsuki was right beside him, her voice lower than he'd ever heard it before. Izuku didn't have the heart to look her in the eyes. The guilt was too heavy for him to lift his head. I'll be close. And with that, Mitsuki walked away. Izuku looked at the door. Behind it was repercussions of his inaction. His heart didn't have the strength to open it. But his guilt did. And so he opened it. Inside was Katsuki, laying on his bed. There were several machines and IVs attached to him, likely keeping him alive for as long as possible. Katsuki himself was pale, his body almost limp. And for the second time in his life, Izuku had seen him weak and vulnerable. A sight he was now learning was his least favorite thing to look at. Deku, Bakugo said his name, his voice weak and hoarse. It was clear he was dying, but didn't sound as angry as he normally was. In fact was calm. And it threw Izuku off completely. Keikaken. Izuku stuttered back, sounding more unsure and scared than the dead man before him. Why do you keep calling me that? Bakugo asked him, his red eyes looking at him not with rage for once, but with curiosity. Sorry. Izuku was cut off. I didn't tell you to stop, Bakugo told him, his tone being firm and strong despite the obvious weakness in his voice. It was as if even when dying, he still commanded power, still had control. I asked you, why do you keep calling me that? Oh well, I guess it's because I just got used to it. Izuku answered hesitantly, completely unsure of himself. Deku. We both know that's not what I'm asking. Bakugo's infamous glare returned, but it lacked the rage it once held. Why do you still think we're friends? After everything I did to you. Why? Izuku looked deep inside himself. He had to be honest. If not now then never. So he looked past all the justifications, all the lies he told himself, and found the truth. You were the only friend I ever had. You were so powerful and strong. I wanted to be like you. Ha. Bakugo looked like he thought about that for a moment. Soven, after all that SHT I did to you. After every time I tried to put you in your place. To break your spirit. To get the message that we weren't friends and I wanted nothing to do with you, through your thick skull. The reason it never took, is because you were in denial, for 10 years. To guess. Izuku's shoulders slumped. There was a short pause before Bakugo continued. Deku. Come here. Bakugo pointed to the spot right next to his bed. With a bit of hesitation, Izuku did as he was asked, and moved towards that spot. And when he reached it, once again he found himself getting grabbed by his shirt. We are not friends, Bakugo told him. There was no anger. No malice. No explosions. Just a firmness and forcefulness, that forced Deku to acknowledge the truth. Izuku looked down, the illusion broken, he now saw reality. Yeah. We aren't. Look at me, Bakugo growled. Look me in the eyes when I'm talking to you. It was funny, even when Izuku was the strongest he ever was, and Bakugo was at his weakest. The blonde still held power over him. And so Izuku immediately did as he was told, and met Bakugo eye to eye. I was AF but, Bakugo told Izuku, shocking him to his core. I thought I was hot SHT. I did whatever the F I wanted. And I didn't give a SHT how anyone felt about it. I thought I was king of the F world, destined to be the strongest. But I was F wrong. I was weak. And now look at me. Killed by my own F quirk. That one statement rocked Izuku's already shattered world. What? Izuku's voice was so quiet that had Bakugo not been right next to him he wouldn't have heard him. Think Deku. If didn't use my F quirk while that BSTRD was trying to drown me, then there wouldn't have been any F fires. Meaning that the goddamn heroes could have actually gone to save my butt instead of trying to save everyone in the F burning buildings. Bakugo told him. If I hadn't F flipped out, then I wouldn't be F dying. Oh God. Izuku thought, absolutely horrified by what he was hearing. He thinks it's his fault. For once Bakugo didn't blame Izuku for something when actually deserved it. Izuku had to set things right. He had to tell him the truth. Kabakugo, it wasn't your fault. Tu was the one who let you die. Izuku admitted as he looked away in shame. Bakugo gave him a confused look. What the F do you mean? Izuku wasn't ready for this. But he owed him an explanation. He backed up, freeing himself of Bakugo's grip. And then he aimed his wrist up towards the ceiling. Thwip. He shot out a web shot at the ceiling. Bakugo looked at the web in pure shock, for once he lost the control he seemed to have had, as he was overtaken by this out-of-nowhere surprise. That's not all. Izuku took off his shoes and socks and went towards the wall. Then, he started climbing it. Not much, he just went far enough to show that he was in fact sticking on the wall. He relaxed his hands and dropped off the wall. Then he turned his attention to the dresser on the other side of the room. Izuku zipped towards it, so fast that to Bakugo he just looked like a blur. Then he grabbed the dresser and lifted it over his head with ease, showing off his new strength. After putting the dresser back down, he looked back at Bakugo. Katsuki looked like he just saw All Might lose an arm wrestling contest. Or like he just witnessed his mom fly. Like he had seen something impossible. After a few moments, he spoke again. You have a quirk. I got it after that spider bite incident, Izuku explained softly. We're guessing the spider had some sort of quirk that allowed it to pass its abilities with its venom. Sorry I didn't tell you about it sooner. Mom didn't want me showing it off in case it wasn't permanent. Katsuki's shock didn't fade. As he took the time to process what he heard. The whole spider thing, well, he would hesitate to think that it made sense. But at the same time the alternative option, that Deku was lying and that he always had a quirk, made even less sense. Firstly, there would be no reason as to why Izuku would hide his quirk. Secondly, that spider bite incident was freaky as hell, so it made sense that there was something more to that than just Izuku being poisoned, and him suddenly having spider powers after that would be too strangely coincidental. And third, he would have to assume that Izuku was lying to him the whole time and that even on his deathbed he was lying to him. The old him may have jumped to the conclusion that Izuku would lie to him even while he was dying, but after taking some time to look back on everything, it made less sense. And after all, if Deku really wanted to keep lying to him, he just wouldn't show him his powers. The thing about Inko not wanting people to know also made sense. If Izuku started showing off his new quirk and then lost it, Katsuki would have given him hell. But the thing that still didn't make sense was what this had to do with Izuku saying that he let him die. Unless of course, Izuku was there. And he just stood back and watched while Bakugo was being suffocated, when he thought he could have helped. You were there, Bakugo concluded. You thought you could have beat that thing. More than thought. I knew I could. Izuku explained. I already did. The look Bakugo gave him told him to explain, and so after taking a deep breath and clearing his throat, he did so. That villain, he attacked me first, but I thought back. I webbed up his face and then I yanked it off. Izuku recounted. I beat him, but then Death Arms showed up, and he scolded me for vigilantism. And while he was scolding me, the villain somehow got his face back to his body and escaped, and when I found him again, he already had you, and there were all those heroes and the people. Tu wanted to go save you. But if I did, then everyone would have seen me commit vigilantism. I thought the heroes could handle it. Death Arms told me I could handle it too. As Izuku went on, his voice became weaker, and tears flooded out of his eyes. I let you die. I should have done something. I could have done something. Izuku fell to his knees, and got into the Dajiza position, bowing his head in a sincere apology, knowing it would never be enough to make up for his inaction. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. While Izuku sobbed, he couldn't see Bakugo's expression. But he could imagine it. He imagined that he was furious, that he was enraged. That he might even try to attack Izuku despite his condition. But when Bakugo spoke a few moments later, his voice was deadly calm. Deku. Come over here. He complied. Because what else could he do? Izuku got up and walked towards Bakugo's bedside. In front of you. His spider sense told him what was coming. And he ignored it. Kaboom. Bakugo used what little energy he had to hit Izuku with an explosion that knocked him on his butt. Izuku was surprised, and disappointed, by how little it actually hurt. Get your butt up and look at me when I'm talking to you, Deku. Bakugo shouted at him, his voice regaining its lost ferocity. Izuku immediately complied, getting back up and forcing himself to look at Bakugo's face again. He was in fact furious. But not the typical rapid beast kind of furious, but more like a righteous fury. Like he had a mission and would accomplish it no matter what. Never. Never. Do that again. Bakugo shouted at him like he wasn't dying. Listen here, you little SHT. Here is what you're gonna do. You're gonna become a hero. You're gonna save every person you see. And you gonna kick the butt of every BSTRD that gets in your way. Do you hear me, DKU? Izuku took a step back in surprise. Kaken. You win every fight. Just like All Might. You save everyone. Just like All Might. Bakugo continued shouting at him with passionate fury. This is our dream, Deku. And you're gonna fulfill it. Do you hear me? Yes, Kaken. I promise. Izuku understood now. This was motivation. Kaken was putting their dreams on his shoulders. Putting his faith in him. Swear, Deku. Swear on your life. Bakugo demanded. Swear. I swear. Izuku shouted, with tears in his eyes, I swear on my life. After that, the room became silent. With the only sounds being Izuku's sniffles and sobs. A few minutes passed until Bakugo spoke up again. Get out of here, Bakugo told him. There's nothing more we need to talk about. Izuku felt like he should say something more. But after a few moments, he figured that Bakugo was right. This conversation was done. And so for the final time, Izuku complied. Leaving the room. That would be the last time he saw his old friend. A week later. Bakugo had killed himself. Once he said everything he needed to say. And settled everything he could. He saw no more point in prolonging the inevitable, and he wasn't going to let some villain be the cause of his death. His funeral was not how Izuku expected it. Not that Izuku had ever really thought of himself attending Bakugo's funeral, but if he had to envision. He thought it would have been grand. With dozens of people coming to mourn the loss of someone like him. But it wasn't. Only him, his mother, and Bakugo's parents showed up. It felt underwhelming. A reminder of just how short Bakugo's life was cut. After the funeral was done, no one left immediately. No, everyone was too concerned about how he felt. His mother was, of course, coddling him the entire time. But much to his shame, his Aunt Mitsuki and his Uncle Masaru were doing the same. He couldn't look either of them in the face. And each word of comfort they gave him, felt like a knife in the chest. Eventually, the Bakugos left. Having to take some time to themselves. Leaving just Inko and Izuku. Inko watched, heartbroken as her son gazed solemnly upon the grave of his frenemy. We should go home. You go. Two need to just take this in. Izuku told her. Please. Inko didn't want to leave her son alone. Not when she felt he needed her the most. But she knew that sometimes, people just needed to be alone. Can you find your way home from here? Inko asked him, wanting to make sure that he was at least safe to leave him here. Yeah, Izuku answered simply. I'll be fine, Mom, just go. Inko hesitated, but eventually, she left Izuku to process things. Now that Izuku was alone, he could focus on the tombstone in front of him. Rest in peace, Bakugo Katsuki. It felt unreal. Even when he heard that Bakugo was dying, deep down he had a hard time believing it. He'd seemed so powerful. So confident. Untouchable. Like the sun itself. And much like the sun, he would probably hurt you if looked at him for too long. So that's why he needed this. Because here, written in stone, was proof that Kaken was dead. You're gonna become AF hero. I promise, Izuku whispered, tears dripping down his face. You're gonna save every F person you see. I promise. And you gonna kick the butt of every BSTRD that gets in your way. Do you hear me, DKU? Yes, Kaken. I hear you. Izuku sniffed, as he spoke to someone who could no longer hear him. I promise. I swear. I will never stand by, and let this happen again. I will save every person I see and take down everyone that gets in my way. I swear, Kaken. I will do this. For you. For us. And with that solemn vow given, Izuku turned away. And for the first time, he left Bakugo behind. It had been 2 weeks since Bakugo died, and Izuku was a man on a mission. He needed to become the best hero he could be. Meaning he would need to train. However, using quirks in public was illegal. Izuku's house was too small to practice in, he didn't own a backyard, and quirk gyms were way too expensive. So he had to break the law a little bit, and so he headed into the most secluded place he could think of that also would serve as a good training ground. The woods he and Bakugo used to play in. While this place was filled with lots of painful memories, if anything, that only further motivated Izuku to push on and improve himself. Of course, since he was doing this illegally, Izuku decided to go while wearing an All Might hoodie, one that could cover up his face in case he needed to hide his identity from someone. This was good because Izuku had a lot of ideas and would be spending a lot of time in the forest. The first one was, of course, working out. Even if he now was super buff and had super strength, he wasn't 100% sure that this was his limit, or that he didn't need to work to maintain his physique. Either way, he played it on the safe side and tried to do regular workouts. The only issue being that with his new super strength, he'd need to find something extremely heavy. At first, he tried trees. But they were too light. And he couldn't find any boulders big enough. He looked up how much super heavy weights cost, but it was safe to say they were out of his price range. In the end, he had to come up with a creative solution. He would go into the woods, bind a bunch of boulders together into a giant ball of webbing, and lift that. Once that issue was solved, there was the second most important thing. Accuracy practice. His webs would be an extremely useful tool for combat, mobility, and rescue. And so to make the best use of them he needed to be able to shoot them quickly and accurately. This was simple enough. All he had to do was web some rocks to some trees so they hanged off of them and then practice shooting webs. It was after numerous practice sessions, that Izuku realized that the more webs he used, the hungrier he was at the end. And that he could eventually run out of webs if he used too much, or didn't eat enough to replenish them. Let's just say that Inko was very upset with the fact that their food expenses would more than triple from now on. The fourth exercise was a bit tricky. Web swinging. Inspired by heroes such as Kami Woods, Izuku thought that if he could use his webs to swing from building to building, or in this case tree to tree, that it would greatly increase his mobility. The problem there was that while that sounded amazing, in practice it was extremely difficult to pull off. He had to constantly control his speed, take into account his weight and trajectory, and have a perfect sense of timing, otherwise he would either go slower than he would if he just ran, or he would fall on his butt or bump into a tree. Although one thing that helped immensely with this was his spider sense. Firstly, it would tell him if he was ever going to bump into a tree, making it rather hard for him to do so unless he messed up horribly or reacted too slowly. And it would also tell him if any point he was about to web onto was unstable and wouldn't support his weight, and would even guide him towards the best places to shoot his webs to keep from falling. All this made the process go from nightmarishly difficult to simply challenging. Next was training one of his most useful powers, the spider sense. This also was a bit problematic at first, as it would require Izuku to be attacked. Izuku's solution to this problem: run as fast as he could through a dense forest, dodging trees while playing puzzle games on a portable console. That may have sounded like nonsense. But there was a method to the madness. Now obviously, since he had no friends, he couldn't find someone to attack him for training purposes. So by running headfirst through the woods at full speed, he would be able to, 1. Get adjusted to his full speed, and 2. Get used to dodging things, by moving out of the way of the trees. The puzzle games were there as a distraction. Izuku figured that it would be a useful ability to train himself to focus on one thing while letting his spider sense warn him of danger and allow him to dodge it. For example, if he needed to save someone while a villain was attacking him. It would also train his ability to dodge attacks without looking at them. Now, given that Izuku was very fast, the part of the woods he was running through was very dense, and puzzle games required a lot of focus, Izuku had failed to react to his spider sense in time, and would run through a tree. Thank goodness his counsel was durable. Next was web experimentation. If he was going to be relying on his webs, he needed to know more about them. Firstly, how long would the webs last? This was crucial to his future as a hero, because if he tried to capture a villain or hold together a collapsing structure, only for the webs to fall apart after a few minutes, that would be disastrous. And on the other end of the spectrum, shooting out sticky webs that never went away would be extremely troublesome for the people he was trying to protect. Fortunately, Izuku found that his webs lasted for about 2 hours. More than enough time for him to end a fight or evacuate an area. Secondly, if Izuku covered someone's face or mouth with them, could they still breathe? This was a tricky one, because if the answer was no, and Izuku tested this out on himself, could die. So instead Izuku put his webs over a fan to see if the air would still come out. Good news, some did, meaning that people would be able to breathe through them so long as he didn't overdo it. Third would be figuring out what his web's weaknesses were. Brute force. Ineffective. Izuku had tested stretching and punching his webs, trying to break them, and even with his strength this only resulted in him getting his hands stuck. In other words, unless he was fighting All Might, he really didn't have to worry about someone punching through his webs. Blades. Mildly effective. Using a kitchen knife, Izuku had tried stabbing and slashing through the webs. This actually provided results. However, it was hard and required that he used his full strength. By the end, the knife was unusable, much to his mother's dismay. In summary, using blades would work, but they would either need to be very good blades, or the user would have to have strength similar to Izuku's. Heat. Somewhat ineffective. Izuku's webs were pretty non-flammable. At least as best as Izuku could tell. He couldn't really do much to experiment with this other than trying to use a lighter to ignite them and dipping them into a fire. Ultimately his webs held up, but due to the limited nature of his test, he couldn't be sure. At the very least he could probably make a shield to block some flame attacks. But he was sure that someone like Endeavor could burn through them pretty easily. Electricity. Effective. With a dangerous side effect. Using lighting was about as effective as using strong fire. Or at least Izuku guessed it was about that effective. But what was really important, was that they were conductive. Meaning that if he or someone else touched them while around electricity or a villain who could manipulate it, they could get shocked. Very important to keep in mind. Water. Mostly ineffective. Webs were mostly unaffected by water, not dissolving or losing their stickiness when exposed to it. Although it should be noted that the range and speed of his web shooting were limited underwater. And presumably, something like a water cutter would be able to cut through the webs. There were other things that Izuku wanted to test, but due to his limited resources and space, he couldn't. Next, Izuku researched support gear. This was actually something that Izuku had kept a keen interest in for a while now. Simply put, it was useful to understand what support gear was capable of, so you could utilize it as a hero. Izuku's current interest was in two things. Firstly, boots. One big issue with his sticking to walls ability was that it required Izuku not to be wearing any shoes or sandals or anything like that. And that could be problematic. People wore shoes for a reason. He could only imagine how many times he would cut his feet on things if he just went around barefoot. So he needed to find something that would both cover his feet, and allow him to stick to walls. He had tried wall crawling with just his hands, but that he found was both slower and far more exhausting. And eventually, he wanted to try wall running. Some gloves would also be appreciated. Secondly, he wanted to experiment with his web fluid. His mother had done a checkup on him and found that the thing making his webs were two glands near his wrist that held what they called web fluid. He wondered if he could recreate this fluid, or extract it, and maybe use it in weapons. But his support gear interest took a back seat. Mostly because Izuku put his focus into his training, including his new acrobatics class. Now, of all the classes Izuku could take, why acrobatics? Why not some form of martial arts? Well, the answer was simple. Because Izuku saw acrobatics as being more useful in the future. With his flexibility, speed, wall crawling, webs, and spider sense, Izuku could potentially jump into the center of a war zone, and not take a hit. But that would all rely on his agility and acrobatic abilities. And all this training, all this experimenting, all these preparations, was only scratching the surface of what he could and would do. Phew. Izuku took a long sip of his bottle of water, as he walked back home from the forest, through the city. It was late, and Inko would most likely be worried if he was out for much longer. After all, it had already gotten dark. His body was hot from the intense training he had endured, and the hoodie he wore did not help matters. At this point, he wanted to get home as soon as possible so he could take it off, and take a bath. Unfortunately, life didn't like to make things simple for Izuku. Right. Person in danger. Suddenly Izuku's spider sense went off, alerting him that someone was in danger nearby. He looked right and saw there was an alleyway nearby. There. His spider sense buzzed in a way that told him he was looking in the right direction. And without any hesitation, he ran over to the dark alleyway. After a few seconds, he saw what his spider sense was warning him about. A woman was being held up against the wall by a bear man. A literal bear man. You dare refuse me? The bear man shouted at the woman. He was obviously drunk, and it didn't take a genius to figure out what was going to happen next. Please. Just let me go. The woman begged, looking at the man with pure fear, her eyes begging for help. Shut up. The bear man said. He raised his clawed hand in the air. He's going to hit her. Izuku ran at the bear man, and jumped and kicked him in the face, knocking him a few feet away from the woman. He quickly turned to the woman. Run. The woman stood there frozen for a minute. Before doing what Izuku said and running out of the alley. Or at least she tried to. Gah. The woman tripped and fell, before clutching her legs in pain. It was then that Izuku noticed several bleeding claw marks lifting her legs, and the bottom part of her dress had been torn in several places. Damn it. He must have been assaulting her for a while. I doubt she can get very far with those kinds of injuries. Rah. Hey. You get back here. The bear man drunkenly got back up and gave a drunken charge towards the woman. His intoxicated mind seemingly not even noticing Izuku was there despite him literally kicking him aside. With the huge, intimidating bear man coming towards him with his sharp claws out and ready to do some damage, and his spider sense blaring, Izuku panicked. And punched the attacker in the gut. Hard. Gah. The bear man went flying back, the punch literally sending him through a nearby brick wall, and knocking him out. Oh no. It was at this point that Izuku had realized what he had done. He committed vigilantism. Again. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. Izuku quickly zipped his hoodie over his face, hiding his identity just in case. CRP. CRP. I can't believe I did that again. What if someone saw me? What the woman tells Wraith woman. He turned around, remembering the injured woman behind him, his rescue instincts kicked in. Izuku kneeled down to her and started wrapping up her wounds in webs. What is that? The women asked with both curiosity and slight disgust. Webbing. I know it's not pleasant, but it should work well to keep the BLD in and the inflections out. Izuku told her. Behind why, Izuku froze for a second. Two new things just happened. Firstly, his spider sense detected something unknown, and then it just stopped. No, it didn't stop, it was turned off. That freezing was a mistake. As suddenly he was wrapped up in some kind of long scarf. What? Izuku was scared. His spider sense just got turned off, and now he was being attacked. So, he reacted. He flexed out of the scarf's hold, his immense strength breaking the bindings apart with ease. Then without wasting another second, he charged towards the direction where the attack had originated. Only for him to stop and freeze again, when he realized who was attacking him. It was Eraserhead. Now he knew why his spider sense disappeared. That knowledge was about the only comfort he gained from this revelation. Because honestly, Izuku would have rather it been a villain attacking him. Because now, a pro-hero, had seen him commit vigilantism again. So I don't suppose why you'd consider letting me off with a warning. He knew it was a stupid question. But it was about the only hope he had. As it seemed like everything was lost. All the work he did, the pain he went through, his promise to Kaken, all of it would become meaningless if Eraserhead wanted to take him in. No, Eraserhead said. And that was it. With one word, all of Izuku's hopes and dreams were crushed. But as typical, when one entered the stages of grief. They started with denial. Please. I just wanted to save this woman. She would have been seriously hurt if I didn't do anything. Izuku argued, his tone thick with desperation. I had to. Vigilantism, illegal quirk usage, property damage. Most likely excessive use of force in self-defense. Eraserhead listed off the crimes Izuku just committed, all in his uncaring deadpan tone. And also, destruction of a pro-hero's support item. I thought I was being attacked by another villain. Izuku shouted out in defense of his action. Regardless. You broke the law. I'm taking you in. There was no room for argument here. Eraserhead showed no empathy, no sign of pity or understanding. There were no exceptions to the law to him. No. Izuku was now hyperventilating, his body spasming slightly with pure panic and fear. It can't end like this. I promised him. I promised. Eraserhead didn't move forward. Because to put it simply, he was unsure of how to approach. The kid broke his capture tool. Not like he escaped it, or wiggled out of it. He broke it with pure strength, something that shouldn't happen. That meant this kid was absurdly strong, and possibly out of his league. Of course, normally he'd use his quirk to level the playing field, but he had been using that the entire time, and it didn't stop him from breaking his capture tool. Meaning this kid had a mutation quirk, and that his quirk was completely useless here. Well, at least I can give my eyes a rest. Aizawa thought as he deactivated his quirk. His target was obviously a child, and they were very obviously panicking. And when someone panicked, they typically did something stupid. Meaning he'd have to watch out for a sudden whoosh. Instead of that, what Izuku decided to do was run away. Or rather, jump away. The green teen hopped onto the roof and started running away. Eraserhead considered chasing him but figured it was futile. The kid was obviously faster and more agile than him, so chances are by the time he got on the roof, the kid would have already lost him. And even if he did catch him, his chances of actually subduing him were small at best. So, rather than attempting a pointless chase, he went to go attend to the obviously injured woman. Later, at the Midoriya household. Inko was already worried about her son, well, not just because of Katsuki's death, most right now because it was late, and he had yet to return. She reassured herself that he was fine. Izuku had been coming home late for a while now. Not quite this late, but still late. And with his new quirk, he had a way to defend himself if need be. He's fine, Inko muttered under her breath as she set the table. He's fine. Crash. And then Izuku burst through the door in tears, sobbing as he ran at top speed to his room. Oh, dear. In Izuku's room. After quickly isolating himself in his room, Izuku proceeded to sob. Again. Whyyyy. Izuku shouted out in a combination of despair and rage. Why? Why does this keep happening? Why do I keep running into villains? Why can't I just help someone with getting arrested? Gah. In a fit of anger, he punched through his wall, his fist making a hole right from his bedroom into the hallway. It was over. Even if he had managed to hide his face, he still had shown off his quirk. His strength, speed, and webbing. If he tried to go to UA, and used his quirk to pass the practical exam, then it wouldn't take Aizawa, who was a teacher at U, long to figure out the kid with the same quirk, body type, voice, and height as the vigilante that escaped him, was the vigilante that escaped him. Maybe if it was another pro hero that saw him, he could hope that they would just forget about him, and not go through the trouble of reporting him to the police and setting up a profile for him. But Eraserhead. No chance. He was strict. Strict and thorough, he didn't let even the tiniest thing go completely. And there was no chance that this would be fully forgotten anytime soon. Kaken. Izuku sobbed out. You only died a couple weeks ago and I already failed. I failed. For hours and hours, Izuku just continued to sob, until he ran out of tears. Inko had tried to come in, but she quickly realized that right now, he should be alone. And so eventually, that left Izuku with the question. What now? He couldn't give up. That simply isn't an option. He made a vow on Katsuki's grave. Bakugo's last request was that he become the best of the best. Izuku didn't know how he was going to get past this. But he would. He had to. Ag. Why? Izuku racked his brain for a solution. Why? Izuku kept shouting why, but he didn't really know what he was shouting why for. Because in the end, he didn't really regret what he did. That woman would have been either killed or greatly injured had he not stepped in. Sure, he wished he could have taken the guy down with less force, and less property damage. But if the situation happened again, Izuku would jump in and rescue a person in danger, all over again. After all, the last time he tried waiting for the heroes, Kaken died. Ugh, vigilantism. Izuku said out loud. He understood why it had been outlawed. Untrained vigilantes had caused tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of casualties over the years. And who knows how much money in property damage. The law should be entrusted to thoroughly trained men and women, who were given the best education on ways to not only apprehend villains but save the lives of those around them. Illegal quirk usage was a problem. Bakugo had used his quirk to try and fight a villain, and all he did was end up setting everything on fire. This is why vigilantism was typically treated pretty seriously, and 9 out of every 10 vigilantes were apprehended. Of course, there were exceptions. Vigilantes of exceptional skill, power, and popularity, were sometimes never caught, with some of them even becoming pro-heroes. And that is when Izuku got a very, very dangerous idea. In a dark alleyway, a trembling man was surrounded by 4, larger, scarier-looking men. Give us your wallet. One of the men ordered, getting closer to the soon-to-be victim. Please. Please just leave me alone. The man begged. I said. Give me your money. The man picked the man up by his shirt and raised his fist up in a threatening manner. I don't think he understands whose turf he steps on. One of the other men smirked and then opened his jaw up wide, as his teeth transformed into sharp fangs. Let me take a bite out of him, and then we'll see if he's still gripping onto his wallet. Ha! Someone! Help! The man called out. Fortunately, his desperate cries would not go on deaf ears. Thwip! Suddenly, a web shot hit the sharp-toothed villain in the face, covering his jaws in webbing. The man's shouts were muffled by the webs, as he recoiled back, before trying to rip the webs off his face, but this just caused his hands to get stuck. What the heck? Another guy got a web kick to the face by an arriving Izuku, knocking him into a wall. Izuku had arrived, decked out in his new vigilante costume, if one could call it that. In reality, it was just a dark green hoodie, a pair of dark green sweatpants, black fingerless gloves, and a thick mask that covered his face, and muffled his voice, and no shoes. Hey, he wasn't rich, nor was he a genius. It was the best he could do. Back to the battle, he let go of the web and flipped onto the ground, landing on his feet. He quickly webbed up the guy he kicked to the wall, trapping him. Then right after that, he webbed the guy with the webbed-up jaws feet to the ground, keeping him stuck to the floor. What the? Who the heck do you think you are? One of the thugs shouted at him, as he charged at Izuku. Me? Izuku asked, before dodging the punch the thug threw at him, before grabbing his arm, throwing him over his shoulder, and webbing him to the floor. I'm just your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, you messed with the wrong gang, fool. The last remaining thug's nails turned into claws, as he got ready to attack. Izuku crossed his arms, trying to look as unimpressed as he could. Yeah. I just took out all your buddies in 2 seconds. But I'm sure you'll be the one to do me in. RAGH. Angered by Izuku's casual nonchalant attitude, the villain charged him. He swiped at Izuku, who easily dodged it without moving from the spot. Oh. Almost got me. The villain swiped again, and once more Izuku just ducked under it. Keep trying. Shut up. The villain raised his claw up and was about to bring it down on Izuku, but the vigilante just grabbed his arm. The villain struggled to try and free it, but Izuku's grip was too strong to escape. 3 strikes. Izuku raised his fingers to the man's face. You're out. And with a flick to his forehead, he sent the man flying 3 feet back and onto his butt. With a few quick thwips, the man was webbed to the ground along with his allies. And that makes 4. Izuku dusted off his hands, before turning to the man who almost got mugged. Or at least where he used to be. The second the thugs got distracted by Izuku, he ran off. Yeah, that makes sense. Izuku thought out loud, before turning to the thug still struggling in his webs. Anyway, you 4 behave until the heroes come, won't you? Thanks. And with that, Izuku aimed his palm at a nearby building and swung away. Once Izuku was a good distance away from the scene, he gave a sigh of relief. Ah. Why is acting confident so stressful? Izuku swore his heart was racing during that entire encounter, but not because he thought he was in danger, but because he was so embarrassed by the words coming out of his mouth. You see, one of the things that sometimes got vigilantes caught was their behavior. Izuku was the same height, build, and age as Spider-Man, and if he acted the same too, then that would bring suspicion. So he needed to change how he acted as Spider-Man. He needed to craft a persona. And so he thought back to 2 people. Bakugo and All Might. And what did those 2 have in common? Confidence. They oozed it. So naturally, Izuku tried to emulate them. However, there was a problem. Izuku couldn't copy Bakugo's jerkish attitude and short temper, nor could he copy All Might's overwhelming power and bright smile. He was wearing a mask after all. So he needed to show confidence in a different way. And after a bit of thinking, he found the absolute best way to do so. Quips. Non-stop, corny, cocky as hell quips. This worked well for so many reasons. Firstly, it was insanely out of character for him. No one that met Izuku even for a second would think that the meek, constantly stuttering, nervous Izuku, would be the same guy flipping around throwing out one-liners like he was untouchable. However, it was so out of character that Izuku was both unused to it, and extremely uncomfortable doing it. He had to spend weeks learning how to throw out quips while not stuttering, and sounding fully confident. And even then, if someone saw his heavily blushing and flustered face, then any illusion of confidence would be broken. Although if anyone got a look at his face, he'd have a lot more issues than people not buying his act. The second reason that Izuku went with quips, is that they also served as a tool he could use in battle. You see, the more annoying Izuku was, the angrier his opponent would get at him. This not only focused their attention on him, rather than any civilians that might be around, and it could make them sloppier and easier to take out. The only reason it wasn't a more common strategy, is because while someone was concentrating on coming up with witty remarks, they could lose their focus on the actual battle. And they could get blindsided by an attack or miss other important details. Fortunately, Izuku had a spider sense. It was amazing how useful that power was. And Izuku could only imagine how many times it would save him in the future. Tree branch. Coming at you from behind. Like right now. Izuku swung to the side and narrowly avoided a long branch surging past him. Oh. CRP. Izuku knew that only meant one thing. Stop. You are committing an act of vigilantism. Behind him, Kami Woods, swinging after him with his quirk. Now, this was a problem. He could escape many heroes with just the fact that he had aerial mobility. Kamui was a pro hero, with the same ability. And much more skill. If you have any respect for the law, you will get on the ground and surrender. Kamui called out. OCRP. 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 Izuku thought in a panic. I can't outswing him yet. Okay, focus Izuku. What advantages do you have? I'm much stronger, and on the ground, I'm much faster. But if I just go on the ground he'll have the aerial advantage to catch me. I need to get him on the ground, but how? Wait. And with that Izuku stopped swinging, and fell to the ground, landing on his feet. I surrender. I hope this works. Izuku would have crossed his fingers if he didn't think it would give away his ruse. Much to Izuku's relief, Kamui came down to ground level, landing a few feet away from Izuku. However, before he got close to Izuku, he shot out his wooden arms and wrapped Izuku's upper body up in it. Good choice, Kamui told him, as he got closer and closer to Izuku. He started going into a spiel about the dangers of vigilantism and how much trouble he was in, but Izuku wasn't paying attention to that. Come on. Closer, closer. Izuku was nervously sweating, hoping and praying that his gambit worked. Eventually, Kamui was right next to Izuku, and that's when Izuku knew, it was now or never. Snap. What? Kamui shouted out in shock, as Izuku broke free of his wooden prison. Kamui tried to jump back and unleash another attack, but he was too close. Izuku grabbed him by his chest and slammed him into a nearby building. Gah! While Kamui was recoiling in pain, Izuku webbed him to a building. People around him gasped and screamed, shocked to see what he did to a pro hero. Sorry about this. See ya. Izuku said as fast as he could, before bolting away, before going into the air with his web swinging. It was a good thing that Izuku wasn't a well-known vigilante yet, otherwise, Kamui wouldn't have been so careless. Yes, there was a profile for Izuku, but he was a small-time vigilante right now. Only known for taking out low-level crooks. So it was unlikely that most heroes would know who he is and what powers he had. Although, this incident would likely bring him unwanted attention. Of course, Izuku would want attention for his plan to work, but not right now. He knew no matter how hard he trained, it would never give him experience. He needed to start fighting villains, and he needed to do it on a manageable scale. Too many people choked on their aspirations. Izuku would not be one of them. XXXXXXXX. It took Izuku a bit to get back home. After all, it's not like he could just walk in through the front door. He was a vigilante, after all. If someone saw him swing in through his window, then it would be game over. First, he had to find a place where no one was looking, take off his costume, and then he could start heading home. Once Izuku did get home, he was typically alone for a while. His mother was back to work at the hospital. She had taken a vacation to spend time with Izuku after the spider bite incident, and then took some more time after Bakugo died. But now she was back to work, giving Izuku plenty of time to go behind her back and be a vigilante. Yup, Izuku still hadn't told her. To be fair, it wasn't an easy thing to tell your mother. Hey mom, I'm gonna try and become a vigilante and hope that I become so impressive that they make me a pro hero. He had told her about his encounter with Eraserhead, and that he couldn't go to the hero course anymore. He needed to because otherwise, she would update his quirk registration, and then the heroes would find him. She had of course coddled him and gave him more reassurances, but all that did was make Izuku feel guilty. He did plan on telling her soon. I mean, after all, once he got more notoriety, it'd be impossible for her not to notice. But he'd do that later. And maybe whenever later came, he'd know what to say to her, but probably not. Once Izuku got back into his room, he immediately got to work on his desk. But not on anything vigilante related, no, this was for school. You see, Izuku still intended to go to UA. Just not as part of the hero course. He now planned on joining the support course. After all, he had held some interest in support gear, and the way they interacted with quirks. And he could help out the heroes in training as well. Bonus. Now would it make more sense for him to enter another school, one where Eraserhead wasn't? Well, yes, but was still his dream school, and he wasn't about to let that go. Plus it was unlikely that Eraserhead would manage to single him out, given that he wouldn't even be in his class and he had only encountered him once, quite some time ago. At least that's what Izuku told himself. Alright. Time to get to work. Izuku cracked open a book and was about to start studying. And then at just that moment, his phone rang. He looked at the caller ID, and saw it was his mother. Why did he have a bad feeling about this? Naturally, he picked it up and held the phone to his ear. Hey Izuku, would you like to explain why there is a spider-themed vigilante on the news? Inko shouted into the phone. Izuku's eyes widened, as he realized that his run-in with Kamui may have drawn more attention than he realized. XXXXXXXXXX, that's right, a spider-themed vigilante has appeared in Mizudafu. Taking down a small gang of villains, before being approached by the rising star, Kamui Woods. A newswoman on ATV reported. The vigilante appeared to have surrendered, but this was apparently a ploy, luring the hero into a false sense of security, before attacking him. The news then showed a video taken on a phone, of Izuku breaking free of Kamui's wooden bindings, throwing him into a building, and then webbing him up before swinging away. The vigilante then escaped, and his currency whereabouts are unknown. The woman said. So far the only things known about him is his spider-themed quirk and his vigilante moniker. Spiderman, Spiderman, Death Arms repeated. The pro-hero was currently sitting in his house, laying back on his couch with various bottles of alcohol around him, a big one in his rather large hands. So that kid became a vigilante full-time? He asked himself, before taking another swig of his bottle. It was obviously that kid from the sludge villain incident. Same build, height, and quirk. Now, one would expect Death Arms to do his job and report Izuku for vigilantism. But he had no intention of doing that. Why would he? How could he? This was probably his fault. Need more beer. Death Arms got up to look for more alcohol. Things had not been going well for him ever since the sludge villain incident. For obvious reasons. He let a kid die. He completely and utterly failed at his job, so much so that a literal child could have done it better. What's worse, is that as far as the public was concerned, Death Arms had saved Bakugo. Because that was technically true. He had saved him at the moment, and he stopped the sludge villain, but ultimately, the kid still died because of his actions, or rather his inaction. But the public didn't know that. The HPSC made sure of that. As far as the public was concerned, Bakugo Katsuki stopped existing after he went to the hospital. But not to Death Arms. Death Arms would never forget him no matter how much he drank. The other kid that would haunt his nightmares, the green-haired kid he hadn't learned the name of. The kid who could do his job better than him, and the kid whose look of pain and suffering as he watched his friend die, would forever stick in his mind. And now that kid was a vigilante. Again he could report him. It was his job to report him. But he'd already failed at his job once before, why start doing it right now? And if he deserved to be a hero then surely that kid did too, so who cares? Death Arms found a can of beer in his fridge and quickly started chugging it down. He'd keep his mouth shut. He owed the kid that much. XXXXXXXXXX, the spider-themed vigilante, how interesting, and he managed to escape from Kamui Woods. Yesha could have potential. But I need to test him. Let's see what villains are active in that area. Still learning, it seems. Sonnet, someone too dangerous but someone who should prove a challenge. Yes, Vulture. He should do. I just need to pull a few strings, and keep the heroes in the area distracted while Spider-Man does what he needs to do. Izuku knew his mother would disapprove of his choice to become a vigilante. The mature thing to do would be to sit down and have a conversation with her about his decision and convince her that he was doing what he needed to do. However, Izuku was a purely irrational being, known as a teenager, so instead, he did this. Wow, Mom, someone else has spider-themed powers. That's insane. Anyway, I gotta go. Bye. Before Inko could say another word, Izuku hung up. He would pay for that later. But at least he had some time until Mom got home to figure out what he was gonna say. And then he heard the front door open. Izuku. He heard his mother yell. She came home early. Izuku was starting to panic even more than before. Sweating heavily, she heard her footsteps getting closer to him. Again, if he was a logical person, he would face her right now and talk to her like an adult. But as mentioned earlier, teenager. So instead he webbed up his door, and quickly started changing into his Spider-Man costume. Tum. Thum. Thum. Izuku. Inko tried to open the door, only for the web to stop it. After a few more seconds Izuku finished putting on his costume, before leaping out the window and swinging away. XXXXXXXXXXXX. After about a half hour of web-slinging, Izuku now sat on the edge of a building. Resting. Oh my god, I am in so much trouble. Izuku thought. Okay, calm down, Izuku. You bought yourself some more time, maybe at the cost of getting scolded, but you have more time to think about what to say. Kaboom. Everything shook as an explosion rang out down at the street level. Ha! Izuku immediately stood up and looked down, seeing people running away from the building that exploded, which from the looks of it, seemed to be a bank. Then from the smoke, a man flew out of the smoldering building. The man was old, looking to be about 50, older than your typical villain, and he was wearing a green flight suit and goggles. Instead of arms, he had two large green wings, which he was using to fly through the air. He also had a bag that appeared to be full of money, strapped to his back. Ahahaha. With no heroes in my way, no one can stop me. The Vulture. The old man shouted as he flew off. A villain. Izuku swung down to the bank and looked at it. People were pouring out of it, and his spider sense wasn't going off, meaning everyone inside should be fine. So after getting a running start, he started swinging after Vulture. It took Izuku about a minute of web-slinging before he got close to Vulture. Izuku then brought his hand forward and shot out a web line that caught the villain's foot. Eh. Vulture noticed the web hitting his foot, and looked down the web line to see Izuku, who was now hanging onto him. What's this? Little pest. Vulture flew next to the building, jerking Izuku into the building and dragging him along the side of it. Ack. Gah. Pa. Izuku grunted as his body skidded along the side of the building at high speed. I need to do something. Wait. I haven't managed to pull this off, but it's worth a try. Izuku used his legs to push him off the side of the building for a moment, and as he came swinging back to it, he landed on his legs and started running. And after doing it for a few seconds he wanted to vomit. Running sideways was just so disorienting it made his stomach turn. Izuku had to stay focused on his movement constantly, listening to his spider sense to avoid tripping over any faults in the building and keeping himself steady. Funnily enough, Vulture actually helped with this, as being tethered to something made it easier to fight off gravity's constant pull. And so he was doing it, running on the sides of buildings that Vulture threw him against. He was doing it unsteadily and awkwardly, but he was doing it. Pa. Vulture saw that his plan to smack Izuku in the sides of the building wasn't working, so he instead just used his wing to cut the web line. With the web line cut, Izuku lost his balance and fell off the side of the building. Quickly he shot out a web line and started web-slinging. He kept chasing Vulture, but he knew he was quickly losing track of the flying villain. If this kept up, he was going to lose him. I need something to make him stop. Wait a minute. Izuku got an idea. Hey, windbag. Are you sure putting that money on your back is a good idea? Your spine might turn to dust if it hadn't already, old man. Vulture slowed down for a second before turning and glaring at Izuku. What did you say to me, you little SHT? The villain then brought his wing back, before throwing it forward, as 5 large feathers shot out at Izuku. Whoa! Izuku's spider sense blared. He was gonna have to dodge in midair. Not a skill he really had the chance to work on. He threw himself into the air, using his acrobatic skills to try and dodge the feathers. Izuku managed to move his body around 3 of the feathers, but 2 of them grazed him, making bloody cuts in his side and his left leg. Gur, Izuku grit his teeth and powered through the pain. He couldn't afford to slow down after managing to get his opponent to do the same. His quirk seems to be similar to Hawk's. But he's definitely nowhere near as fast, and he doesn't seem to be able to control his feathers or bring them back. Izuku looked at the way Vulture was flying. Meaning he gets slower until he presumably grows them back. With his target now moving a bit slower, Izuku once again shot out a web line to try and latch on to Vulture, but the villain dodged it. DMN it. Izuku shot out another web line towards a building to continue web-slinging, but Vulture shot another feather out, and cut the web line, sending Izuku falling to the ground. CRP. 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 Izuku kept shooting out web lines, trying to catch himself using the building, but Vulture had figured Izuku out, and instead of running away, he was going on the attack, shooting out his feathers at Izuku's web lines and cutting them. Without being able to web onto anything, Izuku just kept plummeting to the ground. No, 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 and no. Izuku could probably survive a fall from 20 stories high, but it would hurt a lot. And it would let Vulture get away. And then it got even worse. People under you. His spider sense went off, and Izuku looked under him to see that there were lots of people just standing there, watching them. And underneath him was a mother, and a little girl, staring at him in shock, which was also most likely the reason he wasn't moving. He looked back up and saw Vulture, waiting for him to plummet, and ready to cut off any of his web lines. So maybe he shouldn't just shoot web lines. Izuku aimed at Vulture and shot out a barrage of web shots. Gah! Vulture started dodging the web shots, and Izuku realized that now was his chance. He shot out not 1, but 2 web lines at 2 parallel buildings. The web line stretched a little bit, and Izuku came dangerously close to the ground, before he catapulted back up, right at Vulture. Izuku moved too fast for Vulture to react, and he grabbed the villain as his momentum carried them both further into the sky. Got you. Izuku grabbed onto the villain's collar and raised his fist to punch his lights out. He's attacking your chest. Izuku's eyes widened, he'd thought he had won. And it was that confidence that slowed his reaction and allowed Vulture to bring up his wing and slash Izuku's chest. Ag. Izuku recoiled back, falling off of Vulture as blood gushed from the massive gash in his chest. Vulture started to fly away, and after a few moments, Izuku recovered from the initial blow, shot some webbing to cover up the gash in his chest, and kept going after him. Izuku's pain tolerance was extremely impressive, but a massive bleeding gash in his chest was enough to throw off his focus a bit, and that made him move slower, and Vulture was once again threatening to escape him. DMN it. I'm never going to catch him like this. I need to think of something else. Izuku thought. Maybe an ambush. For an ambush to work, he'd need to know where Vulture was going. Okay. He's probably not going to head to his base or safe house since I'm still following him. So his priority should be to just escape me as quickly as possible. Izuku reasoned. So what routes could he be going? He paid close attention to Vulture's flight patterns. He flew left around a building, then right around another once in quick succession. Before making a hard left around another building and flying in the opposite direction. He's flying in a loop, in a serpentine pattern I think. Right now we just turned a corner. Meaning that maybe I can cut him off as he goes around another corner. Izuku planned, looking over the buildings. That one. Izuku strayed away from Vulture, losing sight of him as he latched onto a nearby skyscraper. I have to move fast before I lose him. Izuku shot a web line to the top of the building, grabbing onto it firmly, before using it to balance himself while he ran up the building. After about 10 seconds he made it to the top and ran over to the other side. Looking down he saw that Vulture had just turned the corner of the building. Izuku jumped off the side of the building, down towards Vulture. Vulture saw the shadow of something above him, and as he looked up, he saw Izuku, coming down on him. Wham! Izuku came down on Vulture and lightly punched him in the face, instantly knocking him unconscious. Yes. The green vigilante celebrated for a moment, before quickly remembering that he and Vulture were still falling. Izuku grabbed Vulture, and shot a web line at the building, stopping them both. Phew. Izuku took a sigh of relief. Taking in his victory. XXXXXXXX. The police set up a perimeter around the exploded bank, with cops, detectives, and other members of law enforcement scuttering about doing their jobs. While the media was around asking questions and taking pictures. When suddenly from above, Vulture fell down next to a police car, stuck in a web cocoon. Before the bag of money he stole landed on top of him. The policemen all immediately crowded around the defeated villain. Before they all heard a THWIP they looked up and saw Izuku swinging away. Sorry fellas, I need to take care of this gaping wound in my chest. See ya soon. The cops had taken out their guns but soon realized that he was too far away to shoot, and instead focused on the captured villain. The media, on the other hand, took pictures of the vigilante that saved the day, while the heroes were nowhere to be seen. XXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXXX Never, in her life, had she been so angry at him before, and to be fair he'd never given her a reason to be. He'd always been so well behaved, so nice, such a good boy. And now he was a vigilante. He hung up on her. And he webbed up his door and left. Of course, she knew why he was acting like this. Katsuki's death being branded a vigilante, meaning he couldn't get into the hero course and had to hide his new quirk. She knew he was hurting. That's why she had arranged for him to go to therapy, unbeknownst to Izuku. But despite this, she still had to be firm with him. She couldn't let him just go around, committing vigilantism. As Inko waited in her son's room for him to return, she suddenly heard the front door open. Figuring that it was Izuku, she got up and marched out of the room, making her way towards the living room with a huff. And when she finally got there, her mouth already open, ready to scold her defiant son. She saw him lying on the couch, bleeding in 3 different places with a massive gash in his chest. Hey, Mom. Izuku gave her a forced smile. Could you give me a hand? XXXXXXXXX Inko focused intently, as she finished up the last of her son's stitches while he laid on the couch. The news was going on in the background, telling her what exactly her son had done. Initially, she had wanted to just send him to the hospital, however, Izuku pointed out that having the exact same injuries that Spiderman had, might be suspicious, and that's only if they didn't find out about his quirk while they did all the appropriate tests. Fortunately, Inko was a doctor, and with how accident-prone Izuku was, she had taken the liberty of gathering various medical supplies, and other things she would need for things like this. Izuku's pain tolerance always made it easy to work on him, meaning it didn't take her too long. Done. Inko put down the needle, and Izuku got up and looked down at himself. The cuts in his leg and side were stitched up, and there were bandages over his chest. Honestly, after the whole affair, he felt a lot better than he thought he should. Thanks, Mom. Izuku looked at his mother and saw that she was glaring at him. And he remembered that he was very much in trouble. Aquas were talking about this now. Izuku, how could you do this? Inko shouted at him as worried tears poured down her eyes. Look at you. I have never seen you this badly hurt in your life. Look, I know it looks bad, but if it makes you feel better, I caught the villain who did it, Izuku told her, hoping his success would make this seem less serious or make what he was doing look less dangerous. It didn't. No. It does not make me feel better. What would make me feel better is if you stopped this nonsense. Inko shouted before her expression changed from one of worry to one of understanding. Izuku, I know it's hard, but is it really impossible for you to just not go out and try to save people? You can't be a hero anymore, Izuku. You just can't. That's not true. Izuku stood up, his voice being louder than he intended for it to be, as his emotions took hold of him. There's still a way. There is a history of exceptional vigilantes being offered hero licenses. It's rare but so you just want to go out there and break the law. Fighting criminals while dodging pro-heroes and the police. Inko laid out how difficult and impossible what Izuku was proposing really was. Izuku, please. This is absurd. What if you run into All Might? What then? I already have a plan for that. All Might, Endeavor, Best Genius, all the pro-heroes' patrol routes and patrol times are well known, with them only making slight deviations from time to time, all of which can be accounted for. Izuku countered. Meaning all I have to do is work around the lower mobility heroes, none of which can touch me. Then how did you run into Kamui Woods? Inko asked. He's still new, I'm still learning his patrol times. Izuku defended himself. And even then, I handled him. Mom, I can do this. Izuku, you're breaking the law. Inko shouted. I don't have another choice. Izuku told her. It's the only way I can be a hero. You don't have to be a hero, Izuku. Inko yelled. Yes, I do. Izuku turned to his mother, aggressively shouting at her with tears in his life. Inko leaned back into the couch, recoiling in shock after hearing Izuku yell at her. Izuku never yelled at her. And almost instantly she could see the regret on her son's face, once he realized what he'd done. Mom too. Izuku went quiet and sat back down on the couch. After that, there was silence for a moment, before Izuku found the words he was looking for. I made a promisito kaken. Izuku looked down at his feet, tears dripping down his face. He made me promise to be the best hero that there ever was. To take down every villain, and save everyone. It was his last request. He trusted me to carry on his dreams, our dreams. It's not just about me anymore. It's not my choice. If I just give up, then I won't just have failed myself, I'll have failed Kaken, and I can't do that again. Inko looked at her son, at the resignation baked into his expression. There was no doubt there. No room to change his mind. Then why did you save that woman? Inko asked him. You could have just wait for a hero. Izuku interrupted her, his tone bitter. Like I did with Kaken. Inko's mouth shut, as she realized she just walked right into that. My spider sense was ringing. It was telling me she was in danger. Izuku explained. If a hero was going to save her, then it wouldn't have gone off. That woman would have gotten very hurt, or she would have died. Do you think I should have just let her die too, Mom? I. Inko was left gaping like a fish as Izuku leveled an impossible question at her. Not impossible because it was hard to figure out, it was impossible because there was only one answer, and she hated it. Izuku gave his mother a sad look. I'm sorry, Mom. But I can't stop. It's not a choice. It's not up to you or me. I'm not trying to become a hero just because I want to anymore. It's my responsibility. I owe this to Kaken. And I can't let you stop me. You can yell at me, ground me, call the cops. I'll find a way to keep going, I'm sorry. When did Inko lose control of this, she wondered. Or did she ever even have it in the first place? Izuku made it clear she couldn't stop him from doing this. And so she was left with no choice, but to support him. Izuku. Inko took her son's hand and returned his sad look. I would never call the police on you. You don't like this, but if you really have to do this, then I'll be here for you. So please, if you're going to continue, let me heal you, anytime you get hurt. Izuku looked surprised, as if he expected to get yelled at and kicked out, and for his own mother to turn her back on him. And that is when they both broke. The two embraced. Letting out all the tears they had. Even if they didn't like how it happened, for the first time in a while, mother and son were on the same page. And while Spider-Man was taking down this C-class villain, you may be wondering where exactly were the heroes. The news was still going on in the background, and the news lady was talking. Well, according to local heroes, they were dealing with another phantom villain attack, or PVS. There have been multiple of these throughout the past few months, incidents where heroes can hear, and even see villain attacks and other crimes happening, only for them to vanish suddenly, without a trace. While some people have attributed these incidents to a villain, others are claiming these are excuses heroes give, to excuse slacking off on their jobs. Whether this is just a scam within the hero society or some form of illusion, is yet to be seen.